morning.
Hello, hello.
I'm Savannah.
And I'm Elysia.
And this is Burden of Proof. Or good, whatever time it is when you're listening to it. It's not even really morning for us anymore.
Kind of. You got like 15 minutes.
You got 15 minutes till it's not morning. How are you? On a scale of 1 to 10, how are you?
It's been a week.
It has been a week for both of us, but this is
Yes.
the best part of the week for sure.
We hope that all of you are doing well
Yeah, I hope your week was
and
good.
not had the drama that I've endured this week.
For sure, dog. For sure, dog. You know, I saw on Facebook that Dog the Bounty Hunter has been...
I was about to say, did you just call me dog?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dog the Bounty Hunter has been in Sarasota a lot in the last 2 weeks or so. I've seen him in a bunch of pictures.
He comes here quite often, I think.
Yeah.
I've seen him advertises he's doing speaking engagements or something at different churches.
Stop. You know, my best friend, shout out to Kale, is obsessed with Dog the Bounty Hunter. And it's on her bucket list to meet him. And she's coming to Sarasota. Maybe I should look at his engagements. See if I can.
See if he's doing anything.
Yeah, I should.
That's interesting. Does she love mullets? What is it about Dog?
I think she just grew up watching that show.
Gotcha.
And
I used to watch it in the beginning.
Watched it. It's good. I've watched an episode for a case once. I don't remember what case it was, but it was
I always thought his one son was cute. I mean,
yeah.
He's not my type, but he was cute.
I think there was some drama about their political views or something at one point or another. So just to disclaim that, sure. I don't remember. We just stand Dog the Bounty Hunter because it's absurd.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
it is.
Kale really likes him. And at least the idea of Dog the Bounty Hunter. I remember when his wife died, I texted her and I was like, oh my gosh.
His wife died.
Oh, yeah.
You just need to go blonde and put in some implants and you're
a lot of implants. That woman was big-breasted, for sure.
Yes, she was.
May she rest in peace. She died of breast cancer, I'm pretty sure. Those funeral pictures were so sad.
By that point, I had stopped following.
They were in Hawaii on the water. Oh, it was so heartbreaking.
Okay.
I didn't mean to bring the mood down.
Sorry. You're ruining the vibe.
Let's talk about murder.
Let's talk about murder instead of death, okay?
Yeah, different.
Yeah, different.
I can't wait to hear the comments on that comment right there.
Sorry, folks.
Well, I'm not going to apologize. There is going to be some jokes in this episode because our main character's name is Character. Our main our main player's name is Candy, so I can't. I'm going to give her a voice for sure at some point.
I don't know what to say to that.
Well, my name is Candy.
Too many things swirling about. So is she actually a Candy or is Candy a nickname?
Candy is a nickname. Her name was, or is, she's still alive. Her name is Candy Montgomery. Her name was Candace, but she goes by Candy.
Okay.
And she spent most of her time where many women in the Texas suburbs do, at church.
Oh, okay.
The Methodist Church of Lucas in Wiley, Texas, was full of women in ministry who found themselves surrounded by women who believed and felt the same way that they did, which resulted in a great friendship and community. When Candy moved to the area in 1977, the small white church became the centerstone of their lives. Her marriage and all of her relationships, including a friendship with a woman named Betty Gore.
Betty Gore.
Yep.
Okay.
It's kind of ironic. Her last name is Gore.
No. Oh, no. Just no.
It's not funny. It's not. It's really
I'm trying
not.
So hard.
But I cried listening to this. I cried writing this episode. So I have to find the humor.
Well, the thing for me is that you have to have a certain level of detachment to talk true crime.
Right.
Because otherwise we would literally fall apart every episode.
Right.
Because it's always sad. So you kind of have to detach. And then once you do that, you can find humor in how absurd so many things are. Or that. Ironies. Her last name's Gore. And this, I'm assuming, is going to be gory.
A little. Yeah, a little, for sure.
So it's hard not. Yeah.
Yeah. But we're going to get there. In the end, you'll understand what we're talking about in about 25 minutes.
Okay.
Stay strong. So Candy and her husband Pat moved to the area after they had already had 2 children, and they dove right into their new lives. And a few years into their time in Wiley, she started really paying attention to Betty's husband. His name was Allan. And she also was starting to kind of feel a little bit just like anxious because her everyday life had become really monotonous.
Mm.
And Allan,
as it can.
right.
You said she was a housewife?
Yes.
Yeah. I can attest to that.
Mm-hmm. You can't really attest, though. I'm just going to warn you right now.
Mm. Okay.
I know you personally. You can't attest.
Well, I just mean to the monotony of
No, I know.
Staying home.
And it wasn't just that. We shall get there.
Okay.
Allan seemed to joke with her more than he joked with other women at the church. He teased her about her volleyball skills, and every once in a while he'd give her a little saucy little winky wink.
Allan.
Across the chapel. After choir practice, the 2 of them would occasionally chat longer than necessary or loiter in the parking lot while the other cars would leave. And the flirting was subtle. It was sometimes so subtle that it was even like Candy couldn't tell if it was just Allan being naturally friendly or if there was something more. But one day it would change when they were playing church volleyball in the late summer of 1978. Set the scene. When both Allan and Candy went to go for the same play in the volleyball game, they bumped into each other. Now, nothing scandalous from the outside. But to Candy, Allan smelled really sexy.
It's the pheromones.
He had a really sexy smell.
It's those pheromones.
Never thought of a smell as sexy. But she did. Those are her words. She was young, and she started realizing that life with her husband was not all that it was cracked up to be, especially in the bedroom. She felt that her husband was a little bit boring, and she was overall just unhappy. She told her friends that what she really wanted was transcendent sex. Like the fireworks.
What?
That's what she was missing. I thought that was an interesting word to describe it.
That's interesting. I mean, what?
I don't know. She wanted an out-of-body experience. Levitation or something.
I'm speechless. What is the expectation? Like, I want to know.
I don't.
The people want to know, Candy.
They do.
Like, what does that mean? Do you want somebody to come in and light fireworks during sex? Do you, you want to light sparklers?
Oh my gosh, wait, sparklers. I love sparklers. Not during sex. That would be weird. I just mean, I love sparklers in general. I'm going to backtrack.
I just had such a bad visual.
So sorry.
Sorry. It wasn't specifically you. I just envisioned somebody holding
Random Cowboy.
Oh dear God. I'm sorry.
We can't listen. My mom listens to everything we do.
Well, that was all me. That was my fault. I'm
so
sorry.
Funny. That's hilarious. Anyway, after this run-in with Allan, she was really determined that an affair was the only way to solve these issues that she was feeling.
Of course, that's the only way you're going to have transcendent
The
sex.
only way. And, but the problem is, if you look at Allan, you're a little confused as to how he's going to solve the transcendent sex problem.
Oh, no.
Because it's not like you're looking at, a DILF across the street who, mows his grass with his six-pack out.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what's happening. And no diss to Allan. He's just a very normal-looking guy. He had a receding hairline even when he was really young. And he was just kind of he was soft in the tummy area, which I'm soft in the tummy area too. But she just thought...
Yeah, but he's an average looking guy. He's an average looking
guy. And she's just and everybody was like, really, Allan?
Really?
Allan?
Allan?
Allan. Okay. Transcendent sex? Allan. Okay.
I mean, you never know.
Nope, you don't. So she knew that even though he wasn't super attractive, it was really the idea that got her going. And when we look at Candy's personality over the years, we kind of understand how we got here a little bit. So when Pat and Candy got married, he was one of the best electrical engineers at Texas Instruments. And Candy had been working as a secretary. She was small and petite and blonde with a high-pitched laugh. She was an Army brat, the daughter of a radar technician who had spent 20 years after World War II bouncing his family from base to base. So she's used to a really fast-paced, moving lifestyle.
Yeah.
And she always had a way with men. Not in like a sexual way, just in like what my friends would call princess energy. Just like they were just drawn to her in any way. And she knew that she could kind of get what she wanted. And she's just living her best life. She's always been super energetic and had this huge personality. And when they moved to the country, they had a son and a daughter, and their marriage had settled into a routine. And Candy was never anybody who had had routine in her life.
Yeah, I can attest to that.
Yeah. She was
same. I wasn't an Army brat or military brat, but my family moved. We moved a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I get even to this day.
Yeah.
Every so often I'll just feel like antsy and uncomfortable and like I need to move furniture, I need to move houses, and I have to I've had to do a lot of work on that. So
so in 1977 when they had moved, Pat was providing everything that Candy could ever expect from a husband, including a $70,000 income from his work on sophisticated military radar systems. And she didn't mind taking care of the house and the children, but she was bored.
Mm-hmm.
You see, the part of Allan that was really attractive to Candy was that he lived a really busy and full life. He was active with the church. He loved being with their children. He was outgoing and he was personable. He sang in the choir. He helped organize all the sports teams. He really wanted to do all the things to get involved and get out of the house.
Yeah, and typically somebody who's an electrical engineer is going to be more it's stereotypical, but it's true. My husband's like, he can be funny and, energetic to a degree, but he's truly an introvert. Mm-hmm. And so then he's like, okay, I'm done.
Right.
I'm tapped out. Let's go home.
Right.
And a lot of people that are in fields like that are like, they're thinkers.
Right. And she looked at Allan like he had everything that her husband didn't.
Yeah.
And on top of that, his wife Betty lacked those things too. Betty,
opposites attract.
They do.
And they often make better pairs.
Right.
Because two energetic people.
That's a lot of energy.
It's too much energy.
Too much energy.
They'll fizzle out and they'll burn out eventually.
Yeah, they will.
I don't know. Some couples are probably just fine like that, but I think there's a reason the opposites attract.
I do too. Well, Betty was pretty and innocent and had a smile that made her very popular growing up. She was one of the most popular girls in her tiny Kansas hometown, and when she went off to college, she fell in love with her math teacher. So everybody was really shocked when she turned up with Allan and they got married because they were all like, I thought you were in love with your math teacher.
Oh, wait. You mean Pat?
No, Betty. I'm talking about Betty and Allan.
Betty. Sorry, I was still on Candy.
Sorry.
Okay,
no, we've moved on to Betty.
Okay, gotcha.
Betty was in love with her math teacher.
Right.
And then she married Allan.
But then she married Allan.
And but I mean they were happy for them, but they were just like, he's a normal looking guy with glasses. He was a little bit standoffish at first because he's just like, some people are just weird. He just comes off as a little standoffish because he was really just put together at the time and very baby faced right when they got married. But they married in 1970 and they settled outside of the suburbs of Dallas. And when their first child was born, Allan was working at Rockwell International, which is an electronics company.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a major defense contractor. Don't ask me what any of those words mean together.
Okay.
And she took a job teaching in the small town of Wiley, which is about 10 miles east of Plano, in case you are any sort of person who knows geography. Outside of Dallas is all you need to know. But she didn't really enjoy her work for very long because she just had no classroom management skills. She could not control these kids. At the same time, Allan's job left him to travel a lot, and she was not keen. She did not like being alone. And this is something we'll see. Like, she does not do well by herself. It seems to me that Betty had some mental health issues that were not disclosed or discussed very openly. Honestly, she went from this super popular girl who, you know, had this big love affair in college and then quickly got married to a very safe man and started an unhappy, quiet life. It just happened really fast. And we'll see later that she very clearly has some anxiety issues. So I don't know where they stem from. I don't know what's going on. Not all anxiety has a stem. It just isn't discussed pretty openly.
Yeah.
In spite of her unhappiness as a school teacher, she did decide that at the beginning of the fall of 1978 that she was going to go back. And they also decided that they wanted to have their next child. But this time she had her pregnancy planned to the exact week. She wanted to get pregnant at this time so that she could have the baby over the summer and she wouldn't have to take any time off.
Right.
My mom was a teacher growing up. I have heard so many teachers trying to get pregnant so that they fall, you know, over the summer. But it's really hard to have a baby when you and your husband are not having sex very often. And when they were, Allan described it as really clinical and like purely for reproductive purposes. And of course, he didn't love this situation and he was starting to feel resentful that he felt like a stud for Betty, like that's all he was there for. And it's clear that they loved each other. They both talked really highly of each other. It's not that they didn't care for each other. It's just that there was just a lot of other miscommunications happening and they were both very unhappy.
And if you're not having transcendent sex.
Right. I mean, how can your marriage succeed without transcendent sex? Sparklers.
What are you going to do? Sparklers.
Right.
Try some sparklers.
Try it. Let us know how that goes.
I'm just kidding. Please don't. Somebody's going to get burned and then sue us.
Oh my gosh. Not to mention, and this is the thing that really clued me in on Betty's mental health issues. She was constantly worried about her health and just always had like little health conditions and was very anxious about it. And I'm wondering if, baby, you may have had a little touch of the OCD. Because me too.
Samesies.
But of course, this weighed on Allan because he's her support person and she wanted him to be home. She hated when he traveled. She got very anxious and you lean on your partner, you know, and it's very hard to be the support person, especially if you're not discussing things and it's not as well talked about and she's not in treatment and that sort of thing. And I don't know what she was doing about it behind the scenes.
And back then, I don't know how much help you could actually get for that.
Right. So when Candy asked to speak with Allan in his car, or in her car, it was his car. There's a lot of cars. This time it was in his car. After choir practice one day, he didn't think anything of it because they're all friends. And Betty and Candy are good friends.
Oh, no.
So she sat in his passenger seat and confessed her attraction to Allan. It was like, hey,
I want to have transcendent sex with you.
You smell really sexy. I want to have transcendent sex with you. No, she didn't say that at first. She just said, I have feelings. I find you attractive. I have feelings for you. Yeah. Not I have feelings for you. I just find you attractive.
Yeah.
There were no feelings. Just transcendent sex goals. He was very floored but flattered. And he said, she wasn't Miss America. She was the prettiest girl in church by far. And he was really surprised that she would be interested in him sexually. But at the end of the day, he really just wanted to stay loyal to his marriage. So they just ignored the car confession for several weeks. He was like, I don't want to do this to Betty. And she says, I don't want to hurt Betty either. So that's fine. I just wanted to tell you. And she left. But with time, Betty continued to weigh on him. And one night when he was cleaning up after a church event with Candy, he asked, like, hey, so when you said that in the car, like, what do you have in mind? So the two of them went back to Candy's car. I told you, a lot of cars. And she asked him point blank, like, do you want to have an affair? And he was like, I really love Betty. I don't think I can do that. And he explained that Betty had actually had an affair when they were living in New Mexico, and it crushed him. And he doesn't think that he could subject her to that emotional trauma. Not to mention that Betty had just become pregnant. So it just wasn't a good time and it wasn't a good idea.
It wasn't a good time. Like there's
Well,
like
he didn't say
there's
that.
a good time.
He didn't say that. He just was like,
Let's
no,
wait
I can't.
for a better time to have an affair.
I just can't do that. Like my wife is pregnant.
No, I understand.
And Candy was like, yeah, I get it. I love Pat too. It's up to you to decide. Like if you want to have transcendent sex, I can bring the sparklers. But it's up to you to decide if you want to do it. I'm down for whatever. That's exactly what she said. I'm down for whatever.
But if not, you're going to have to keep a distance from me so I don't smell you.
Yeah, because you're so sexy.
Okay.
She didn't go into this wanting to tear up his marriage. She just wanted to sleep with him. So she said she would respect his decision and not mention it again. And Allan kissed her before he left the car. And then Candy went home to Pat.
So they keep saying that they don't want to have an affair, but then they keep doing
Talking
things
about, having an affair.
that are clearly one step closer.
Yeah. So in the meantime, Allan talked with one of his friends who had just gone to a marriage retreat through their church, and they had great success with it. And he said they came back, and even he could tell a difference in his friend's marriage. And so he brought it up to Betty, and he thought it would be good for them. But when he mentioned it to her, she was very defensive and was like, she was like, you think we need that? Like she got very upset. So he dropped the subject. And I think that initial conversation, I can understand how it would go on both sides, you know?
Yeah.
So on the day of Candy's 29th birthday, Allan called her and said he wanted to meet with her for lunch to discuss arrangements. Now, these two would meet several times to discuss logistics and pretty much talk over this entire mess, and they would talk each other into it. At one point, Candy was about to throw in the towel because she didn't even think he was aggressive enough to give her what she wanted. Because if he couldn't even decide one way or another, then like, how is he going to give her transcendent sex?
Yeah. I've never in my life heard of such a thing, of people like plotting and planning an affair like this.
Oh, so over one day, she decided, she was like, this is the last time I'm doing this. If we meet again and we don't get it, then it's done. So she like had written down on a piece of butcher paper a pros and a cons list, and he invited her over, and over lasagna, they had listed all of the pros and the cons.
At this point, you're meeting so often, you might as well have done it because it looks like you're having an affair, whether you are or not.
Exactly.
I mean, that's not
the same, but we know what you mean.
I don't mean that literally.
Right.
I just mean, what the hell are you doing?
Right. But they did decide to have the affair. It came with a list of rules, though. Are you ready? I have the list.
I don't know that I am, but
okay. If either one of them ever wanted to end the affair for whatever reason, it would end. No questions asked. If either one of them became too emotionally involved, the affair would end. If they started taking risks that should not be taken, it would end. All expenses, food, motel room, gas, all would be shared equally. They would only meet on weekdays when their spouses were at work. Candy would be in charge of fixing lunch on the days that they met so that they could have more time. They figured they would use all of Allan's 2-hour lunch break. Candy would be in charge of getting the motel room for the same reason. They would meet on a Tuesday or a Thursday once every 2 weeks. That was because that was the day that Candy had free while her small young boy attended preschool. And she took him every Tuesday and Thursday from 9 to 2, but she figured she would need one of those days to do errands and stuff. So only they could meet one day every 2 weeks. And they set a start date on December 12th. It would begin.
What? Okay. What the hell?
Yeah.
What is your definition of transcendent sex? Because
it starts with a lot of planning and a spreadsheet.
Yeah. Like you're saying you're bored with your spouse because it's gotten monotonous. That sounds like the most monotonous thing I've ever heard.
I love all the planning that goes into it. It's like,
what?
Because you know the reality is they were getting excited because of all of the like anticipation and that sort of thing. But at the same time, it's like you came into this, you said, for just transcendent sex and fireworks. So
but you scheduled it down to like the start date, the time,
who gets what,
who makes lunch.
Right.
This is insane.
Yeah.
I am flabbergasted.
Yeah. I mean, so they started, the first day on December 12th, they were really nervous, both of them, but eventually it started to feel natural. And after they were finished having sex, they would lay in bed and talk, and they both found themselves confiding in the other, looking forward to the conversations more than the average sex. And that's the truth. That's what it was. It was average. And Candy would later say that the first few times after they were together, she realized that Allan wasn't going to get any better, despite all of her instructions. He was the best he was going to get.
Done.
Alicia's checking out.
I'm done.
She was like, yeah, I mean, he's not going to get any better. I've told him a million times where it is. He doesn't care.
Oh, God.
Yep.
But you continue. Well, you're continuing because of the emotional aspect,
Right. And B, she realized two things. A, it wasn't going to get better. And B, he was not capable of the fireworks. There was no transcending happening.
Well, yeah.
She was staying in her body. There was no out of body. Because, But it was still decent. It was fine. It was good. It was fine. She just had these really high expectations. And of course, Allan thought it was top notch.
Of course.
Yeah, because it's Allan.
Because it's Allan.
Because it's Allan.
Because he's with the prettiest girl in church.
Right. But, the reality is both of them were more drawn to the conversations afterwards.
Yeah.
Where he didn't feel pressure to make Candy happy or comfortable. He could just be himself, and she was always happy with that, and she felt the same way. It was just a good place to confide. And lately, they'd been exchanging funny little greeting cards, and whenever Candy would drive into the little town on an errand, she would stop at his office and paste little gifts or cards on his windshield. And it got to the point where he would go out to check his car, even if he was just staying for lunch that day, to see if there were brownies or candy, literally a candy. She would make candy, little gifts for her, from her on his thing. And at one point he gave her a little statue, and it started to get a little bit weird. And at some points they would just forgo having sex and just have lunch together. And by February, after only 2.5 months, she was starting to feel a little bit anxious that it was getting too serious. And at one lunch, she basically told Allan, I'm getting in too deep. And this is their conversation. She says, I think I'm getting in too deep. And he says, what do you mean? She says, I don't want to fall in love with you. We're getting serious, and I know this is a temporary thing, and I don't want to have to deal with myself later if we go too far. And he says, well, how do you know that this is getting too serious? She says, I think about you too much. He says, but I thought you were the one who said you've got to plow into life and see what happens. She says, well, that's right. I did say that. He says, well, she says, I guess I'm caught in my own trap. He says, it won't get too serious if we don't let it get too serious. I think the relationship is temporary too, but we have to let it run its course. She says, well, if you're not too worried about it, then I guess that makes it half all right.
What was the point in writing all the rules?
They're not listening to their rules. Right. Because she said,
It's
if
human
anybody
nature.
wants to end it, we can end it. But then she brings it up, and he's like, no, it's fine.
Yeah, but this is human nature.
Exactly.
This is why... Whatever. Okay. I don't want to go on a tangent. Carry on.
So Candy and Pat, her husband, take a trip to Georgia to meet and visit their family. And when they return, her and Allan meet. And at their meeting, after they finish not lighting off fireworks, they decided to take a break from their affair because Betty was getting really along in her pregnancy and she needed Allan home more.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he just was also just like, yeah, my wife is really pregnant. This is really not okay. And she was like, yeah, that's fine. We can take a break. We chillin'. And Candy had started to feel really nervous when she was around Betty. She was worried she was going to look at her and know, but all of that kind of seemed to dissipate because Candy hosted a surprise baby shower for Betty and all of their choir friends, and Betty didn't seem any the wiser. She had a great time. She felt very appreciative, and so Candy was like, all her fears of kind of getting caught started to dissipate, but she still, the heart was beaten under the floors a little bit for her.
Yeah.
Yeah. After the baby was born, they had a second daughter. Allan found his marriage doing a little bit better and his affair being a little bit worse. Candy and Allan would bicker, and both of them felt really guilty, more guilty than ever. And things started to really fall apart, and he decided he really needed to take more time away from Candy. So he decided to take Betty to Kansas to introduce the new baby to her family. When he returned, I think it was a 2-week trip or something like that. When he returned, the following day was supposed to be a day that he was going to meet with Candy. But Betty asked if he could stay another day home from work and just like, we just got back. We have a lot of errands to run. And is there any way you could just stay and help me? And so he basically faked a church call to Candy and was like, subtly like, I can't make it to our rendezvous tomorrow. And she got upset because her and Pat were going to go out of town. And this would mean she wasn't going to see Allan for another 2 weeks. So obviously the feelings are a little bit too high because she was genuinely upset. And when she gets back, when her and Pat get back from their trip, they do meet up and they have a really long meeting in the Como Motel where they always met. This was not a talkative meeting. No fireworks, though.
Oh, I was going to say,
No.
now is there transcendent sex?
No, it was just like a little bit more than regular sex.
A little bit more.
Like a little bit more exciting than regular sex, only because it was an affair.
Because they hadn't seen each other in like a month.
Yeah, but it was not transcendent sex. For the first time in their marriage, later that night, Betty tried to initiate sex with Allan.
The first time?
The first time in their entire marriage. And like, mind you, their marriage has been doing better since she had the second child. And like, I don't know why, but things were going better.
Yeah.
And so she felt comfortable initiating. But because he had had such a long rendezvous session with Candy, he couldn't perform, which of course crushed Betty.
Mm-hmm.
And that solidified to him that if he wanted to salvage his marriage, he had to stop seeing Candy. Like this was it. So he brought it up to Candy, and Candy was all like, well, when I tried to end it with you, you wouldn't let me. And they got into it and they left like very unresolved. And after so much meticulous planning, they were still in the position that they tried so hard to avoid, where they were both so emotionally invested. And like, Candy knew that the end was coming when Allan finally told her that he and Betty were going to this marriage retreat that he had tried to talk to her about in the beginning. It's called Marriage Encounter. A bunch of people at their church had gone to it. It was hosted by their church, but it wasn't religious.
Oh.
It was hosted by like therapists, but their church like promoted it, kind of thing.
Gotcha.
And it took place like in a cabin, and there was a bunch of couples there. It wasn't just like a one-on-one thing.
Yeah.
And I read a whole spiel about how the marriage encounter worked and what each day looked like. And I can totally see how this would open up the lines of communication, especially when couples aren't taught to communicate that well, especially in the 70s and especially in a lot of places that are super religious. It's very much just like is what it is, and it's not an open line of communication. This eliminated that. I can see how it would be super helpful, especially for Allan and Betty, who did love each other. They just didn't know how to talk.
Yeah.
So they got to know each other, and when they left, it was like a brand new couple, and they had all this determination in their marriage. And their youngest daughter, Bethany, had been being watched by Candy. And remember, Candy is one of Betty's best friends. And Pat and Allan knew each other too. Like, they liked each other. Like, Pat at one point had told Candy like how much he respected Allan, and like they all knew each other. And so they stop on their way home from Marriage Encounter to pick up Bethany. And Allan went to the door, and when Candy handed off Bethany, she asked how it had gone, and he says it was really good. And shortly after that, they officially ended their affair. Now,
okay, you had me on the edge of my seat there for a moment.
No, Bethany's okay.
Okay. Poor little Bethany.
Oh, poor Bethany. So Pat and Candy were very intrigued by the marriage encounter, and they went and they did it. They just didn't have the same results as other people had had.
Yeah.
It wasn't life-changing. It wasn't quite as successful. And a few weeks later, Allan left on a work trip, leaving an excited but nervous Betty behind. She was nervous because he had to be away, and like I said, she really hated being alone, but she was excited because when he got back, the two of them had planned a second honeymoon to Europe. And it was going to be the first time they were going to be without the kids for like, I think 4 years or something like that. And their marriage was doing so much better. She really thought that this would just like really solidify where they were at. And she was really excited to go.
Yeah.
So when he landed after his trip, he tried to call his wife. And he didn't get an answer. So he was like, that's weird. But then he tries to get a hold of her from his hotel room. He doesn't hear from her then either. She always told him when she was leaving the house and when they had gone over her day and her plans, like she wasn't planning on going anywhere, and it just wasn't like her. So He had tried to call her again. Like, he and some of his work guys had gone out, and he tried to call her from a payphone. She didn't answer. So he calls his neighbor, and he says, can you just, like, see if the phones are down? And no, the phones are up. No problem. And he knew that Candy was keeping their oldest daughter, Elysia, because Elysia was the same age as one of Candy's daughters.
Right.
So he called Candy and was like, hey, have you, like, heard from Betty? Like, do you have Elysia? Is everything okay? I can't get a hold of her, and, like, you're watching our child, so is everything okay? And she says, yeah, I mean, I saw Betty earlier because she said I went over to pick up Alyssa's swimsuit because I was going to take her to her swim lesson. And she was like, she just kind of like rushed me out of the door, but she was fine. He said that he couldn't reach her, but he was going to talk to his neighbor and see if they could go check on her. And he talked to Elysia and said hi and told her to be on your best behavior for the Montgomerys. And, you know, and he asked Candy, like, hey, like, can you just watch her a little longer? I'm not sure what time Betty was supposed to pick her up, but can you just keep her in case I don't hear from her? And she was like, oh, no, she was supposed to be here all night. That's fine. I mean, like a lot of church communities, this was a village. They all raised their kids together. And
yeah,
it was very common for Elysia and their daughters to like flop back and forth between the households. And after a lot of back and forth, and he even called all the hospitals, he got one of his friends to go into the home by any means necessary. He was just like, something is wrong. I cannot get a hold of her. This is not okay. Yeah. Like, he asked a neighbor, and the neighbor was like, I think you're being dramatic. Like, her car is here. And he says, yeah, so why isn't she answering the phone?
Yeah.
So,
and you don't know, like, maybe she fell. Maybe.
Right.
When you've been married, even more than like a few years, you get into like a normalcy of how you interact and communicate when you're apart. And when you stray from that,
it's weird.
It feels weird, even if it's for no reason. You know, but today we have like location.
Yeah.
So you can go,
you can just say, oh, yeah.
Okay, you're there. But even if he had that, and
she's
he saw
answering.
Like, oh, she's still home, but she's not answering.
Right.
You're still eventually going to be like, well, something's not.
Oh, exactly.
Right.
I mean, Nicholas will do that because my fiance works 12-hour shifts, and so he'll be at the hospital all day, and he's very busy. So he works in the ER. It's very normal for us to maybe send one or two texts the entire time he's at work.
Yeah.
But if he hasn't heard from me all day and it's like 8 o'clock, even if he can see I'm at home, he still calls me. Yeah. He's like, oh, I just wanted to make sure you were okay. I just hadn't heard from you. I'm like, yeah, I'm good. He's like, okay, bye. That's it. So, I mean, everybody has their own little things. And so anyway, his friends were like, yeah, sure, we'll go over there. And it was like 3 of them, and 1 or 2 of them brought their wives because, like, FOMO, obviously. If you're going to go, I'm going to go. It was actually, they were just nervous about them going alone because it just all kind of felt really, like, high stakes. They were very nervous. And after trying all of these keys and the utility and the back doors, they finally tried, like, one of the more front doors, and it opened, unlocked. The minute that they stepped into the home, and I'm sure from part of the outside of the home they could hear Bethany crying, but it was just normal. When they stepped inside, Bethany was screaming bloody murder. I mean, she's about 12 months old at this point.
Yeah.
And just, like, screaming.
Aww.
So they immediately were like, okay, well, let's find the baby first because this house is dark. There's no noise other than the screaming of the baby. And, like, normally if a baby's screaming, you'll hear somebody, like, trying to do something about it. And that was not happening. So they found the baby, and she had very clearly been alone and in her crib for way too long.
Yeah.
So this is why I mentioned that the wives came along, because they were, like, the husbands were so upset. They were, like, panicking. The wives were like, just give me the baby. You go find Betty. Yeah. Like, everybody was very clearly upset. They knew that this was a serious situation at this point. I just thought it was interesting that the wives were like, yeah, they were freaking the F out. They couldn't calm down. So we had to step in and take care of Bethany. Because they were just like, one of the dads was just holding her so close, like, oh my God, are you okay? Like, I was very emotional reading their testimonies and, like, talking about, because, I mean, they're all raising their kids together, like
parents. Yeah.
So they kept looking, and they sort of split up. And when Lester made his way into, like, the kitchen and utility room area, he immediately shouted, like, don't go any further. She's dead. There was so much blood that Betty's arms were floating, and Lester didn't even need to look further because there was no way that she was alive. And it had clearly been a long time based on the state of the blood. And he just assumed she'd shot herself in the head. Like, that was just his gut instinct and reaction. That's what he said to their friends. She was like, she's dead. She shot herself in the head. I think he said she blew her head off. Like, that was how bad the scene was, that was his reaction. So they kind of stepped away. I mean, they were still in the house. Like, don't get me wrong. They were still in this scene. But Jerry, their friend Jerry, must draw the short straw. Because he's the one who called Allan.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So he calls Allan, and Allan was like, what's going on? And he says, it's not okay, but the baby's okay. And he said, what about Betty? Is Betty okay? He says, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, but it looks like she's been shot. And Allan's first thought must have also been suicide, because he says, how? We don't have a gun. Like, so somebody shot her? Because we don't own a gun. She didn't shoot herself.
Yeah.
Jerry confirmed, like, Alyssa's safe. She's still with the Montgomerys. We have Bethany. She's here with us. And they're calling like, one of the other friends had gone to call the police at the same time as he's calling Allan.
Okay.
And Allan got off the phone, started trying to get home, and he called Candy and was just like, hey, I know that they said you've got her, but can you keep her? And he told her what happened. He was like, I'm really sorry. Betty's dead. We don't know what happened, but can you please keep Elysia and don't tell her anything, because I want to figure out what's going on, and then I'll talk to her, and just kind of keep her away from anything. Like, don't turn the radio on.
Of course.
And she was like, oh my gosh, yes, let me know if there's anything you need. Like, of course we can keep Elysia. That's no problem. And so he said, and the Candy the next morning, she, acted everything was normal. She put Elysia and her daughter to bed. The next morning, her phone wouldn't stop ringing. The word had gotten out that Betty was dead. And she had turned on the radio at one point, kind of forgetting, heard them start talking, turned it off. Luckily, the kids weren't around, but she was like, oh, I forgot. Like, turn that off. And everybody just kept wanting to call and talk to her about it. And she just wanted to keep herself busy. So she worked on guard work and kept Elysia away and isolated from, other things. Allan was told by a friend who worked as a reporter that the case was a murder and that she had been killed with an axe and not a gun. You see, part of the reason they initially thought that she had shot herself in the head was because one side of her face and head were drastically disfigured. However, once the shock wore off and a medical examiner got involved, it was discovered that she had actually been brutally slaughtered with an axe, being struck over 40 times.
40?
40.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, and I wondered when you said her arms were floating.
Yeah.
I was like, what does that mean if she was shot? Like, how? Ugh.
Yeah. So Candy, by her own report, was the last person to see Betty alive, because she said she had seen her to go get the swimsuit, and that was the last person that they knew had seen her.
Right.
And so she became a main suspect in the case within just a couple of weeks. And the police questioned her several times, but her version of the day's events and her relations with the Gores seemed to be airtight. And Allan eventually would tell them that he and Candy had an affair, but it had ended 7 months ago.
Right.
Because it had ended just a couple of months after Bethany had been born. And so this gave the police motive to really continue looking at Candy as a suspect.
Yeah.
But at first, like, the reason they had talked to her a couple times but hadn't really pushed it was because they were like, this beautiful, bubbly housewife, like, axed someone to death? No, probably not. It's just they didn't really have any other place to look. I mean, there was like a footprint, but nothing really else.
Never underestimate.
Yeah. So, but after they found out about the affair and they had motive, they actually arrested her and charged her with murder. And for a long time, Candy denied the charges. She hired a friend from church who was actually a personal injury attorney to represent her. But a lot of lay people think that attorneys can just do everything.
Yeah, and hence my face.
Personally, like, that's just very different. But,
Yeah.
And he, like, really long story short, got a hypnotist involved. I don't know. The whole hypnotist thing really never made sense to me.
Why?
I couldn't tell you. Mostly his reasoning was he wanted to really, like, jog the memory of Candy of anything that could have, like, resulted in, like, something getting her off the charges. Like, she said, like, I can't remember. Like, this is what happened between her and and I don't remember.
Yeah. And because if you're defending somebody, you need to know
what happened.
And if she's sitting there like, I don't know, I can't remember, then he wants to get to the bottom of what happened so he can best defend her.
Right. And so we're gonna come back to the hypnotist in a little bit, but in the meantime, he hires psychiatrist to the millionaires, Dr. Fred Faison, to be the doctor on the case. Now, Dr. Faison decided that, and he may have been the one that really pushed the hypnotist, but like
Gotcha.
the attorney is the one who brought it up, and he was like, I know just the guy.
He said it just like that too.
Yeah, obviously. And like, I know that hypnosis is real, but I am not the kind of person that can be hypnotized.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I can either.
There's no way. I know you very well, and you're a lot like me. I'm not letting somebody else get in here in this noggin.
Yeah.
No. But I do know that it is real, and apparently Candy was very susceptible to it. She went under right away. They did 3 very long hypnosis sessions, and the story of what happened in the utility room finally took shape, at least Candy's version. On the day, she doesn't get into too much information, but they do talk. The first time, they don't really get much, but then they eventually get out of her a time that she went to the ER because she had gotten hurt, and when she was in the ER, she was crying, she was in pain, and her mom shushed her and said, "Shh, what would people think of you crying like that? Like, be quiet. We're in a hospital."
Exactly.
Right.
You're in a hospital. It's okay.
So we get that little bit of information, and the psychiatrist is like, that's the reason I'm latching onto it.
Oh, Lord.
Okay. So 1980, the trial begins. And on the stand, a matronly and modestly dressed Candy answers questions very short and abruptly. And the defense paints the story as so. You ready?
I'm not sure I'm ready.
Yeah, you're not. So, and mind you, again, this is all coming out of hypnosis. So do with that what you will.
Okay.
Betty wasn't expecting Candy to drop off Elysia until noon, so right when she had put her infant down for a nap, she had just sat down for the first time all day when she heard a knock at the door. Candy had come early with no Elysia to tell her that the girls wanted Elysia to come with them to the movies that night. I think they were going to go see Emperor Strikes Back. Like, it was a new Star Wars movie that just come out. But she said she knew Elysia had swim lessons, but she didn't mind taking her so that she could save Betty the trip, and I already have her, and I'll just take the kids to the pool while I'm there. No big deal. But I would need her bathing suit. As long as Betty was okay with them going to the movies, this would be a really good situation. And she had dropped the girls off at Bible study and was like, I'll just run and go get the suit. So she goes over some small details, and Betty's like, oh yeah, give Elysia peppermints when she puts her head under the water. Like, that's how we reward her for that. And they sit down to chat for a minute, and out of the blue, Betty point blank asks if she was having an affair with Allan. At first, she was like, no, we're not. What are you talking about? We're not having an affair. And Betty was like, but you were having an affair, weren't you? And Candy takes a second, and she says she quietly confirmed and tells her it was a long time ago. It's not happening anymore. And Betty just stands up and leaves the room. Candy's like, Betty, come back. We can talk about this. And she comes back down the hallway, but she's holding the axe. Things escalated, but Candy and Betty were able to de-escalate the argument at first. And Candy says, I don't want anything to do with Allan. And Betty's like, I think you should leave and bring Elysia back tomorrow. But like, I can't see you right now. So she puts the swimsuit down, and she gives her the peppermints and the swimsuit. She's like, I need you to go. When they're on their way out, Candy looks at Betty and apologizes. She's like, Betty, I'm sorry. And Betty just flips. She goes into a rage. And she says, I'm going to have another baby, and Allan is mine, and he's mine forever, and I have to kill you now. And they grappled. And Candy got hit in the head at one point with the axe, and they fought all through the house. And at one point, Candy gets a hold of the axe, and she brings it down in self-defense, carving a chop in the back of Betty's head. And she ran, hoping to get away, but just as she thought she was free, Betty comes back with the axe. And they fought through the rest of the home, heading towards the utility closet, and finally, Betty had her pinned, and she was going to kill her with the axe. And Candy says, please, please let me go. And Betty says, shh. And in a psychotic break, thrust back into a moment in her childhood, and in fight mode, she grappled the axe away from Betty and began swinging with all her might and she hit Betty 40 times, and Betty didn't die until the 41st hit. The courtroom was pin drop silent, just like this. And I'm telling it as dramatically as they told it. I'm telling you.
My hands.
She's like, I don't know what to do with my hands.
Make it make sense. That's like a poorly written movie.
I think it's a really well written movie, actually.
Well, I guess in the horror genre, it is.
Yeah. I mean, listen.
It's just
they walk
it's
through,
just too much.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to process. And I mean, I can't imagine being a juror sitting there listening to all of this stuff that they pulled out of her through hypnosis tapes.
Yeah.
And she's sitting on the stand answering all these questions, and she's basically saying it was self-defense and a psychotic break based on this. Like, that's what they said. And that Betty had a psychotic break when she went to kill Candy, and that they just fought, and that's how it ended. So
I don't know.
They then walked through all of the things that Candy had done to cover this up. So she had gotten rid of all of her clothing that she wore. When she was doing the yard work, she chopped up all of the flip-flops that she was wearing the day before. She kept Elysia. She did all of these things to kind of cover up her crime because, and according to her, her story is that the next day she felt like something was wrong, but she couldn't remember what happened. And so when Allan calls her and is like, I can't find Betty, she's like, no, Betty's okay. They said she was shot. Like, you didn't shoot her. Like, you're fine. Everything's fine. But then she would catch herself cutting up her flip-flops and she didn't know why. Like, she was just really out of it and she didn't remember what had happened, and she was just trying to convince herself that everything was okay, according to Candy. The jury finally went away for deliberation. Everybody was exhausted. I mean, this was a long day in the courtroom. I cannot imagine.
I'm exhausted.
I know.
I don't know that I can believe that. I don't know if I was a juror that I would.
Well, so they went to deliberate in early afternoon, and later they came back the same day with a verdict. Candy Montgomery was found not guilty of murder in the first degree.
Are you serious?
I'm dead serious.
Did they get her on lesser charge?
Nope.
Are you... What?
Nope. She was found not guilty. It was not murder in the first degree. It was self-defense in their eyes. And
40 times is self-defense.
Mm-hmm. That's what hung me up was the overkill. That's literally what I wrote. I was like, it's a really good story. It's a damn good story. And I could believe it if it was 1 or 2 strikes, if it was 5 strikes, but 41 is so far overkill. But at the same time, like, Betty didn't really have any motive to kill Candy. There's also no indication that she even knew there was an affair. And their marriage was good. Like,
and especially how anxious
right,
Betty is described. I can't imagine a wife who already suffers from like certain types of anxieties like that not like keeping silent to her husband.
that she did. Yeah.
Like, I find that very hard to believe, especially if they were doing better and like had gone to that conference and started communicating better. I find that very hard to believe.
I mean, I could even see Allan telling her as part of this, like, because she had had an affair before. This is something that their marriage has already survived once. You know, they've dealt with it. So yeah, I don't know what to think. I mean, I honestly don't think that it was self-defense, but I think in my personal opinion, and I'm careful because
go ahead.
My personal opinion is that Betty may have told her that she was planning on trying for another baby, and Candy just got super jealous or something.
Lost her crap. I don't know, but actually what makes me the most mad, like, I can understand saying, well, we don't know. We can't prove that it was a planned, premeditated, first-degree murder.
Right.
But she killed her in her home.
With
like,
their
it's
axe.
not like Betty was at her house. Like, so
But if she's being chased, it's not like she can leave. If she's pinned, it's not like she can leave.
But then afterwards, she.
Remember, I mean, they're going to paint Candy out as she was this very, involved in the church. She was involved in raising all of their children. And
I'm just saying if I was a juror, I would have been like, can we not do like manslaughter? Come on.
The public was also behind the Montgomerys. Not like saying that she was innocent. Because remember, they don't know the story. They just, when she was arrested, Pat Montgomery said that they received so many cards and well wishes and people like thinking and praying for their family at this time because like nobody believed that it could have been Candy. It's a smallish town. Like it's just, yeah.
But they could believe that Betty was like grabbed an axe and was like, I'm going to kill you now.
I think that's probably more believable than cold-blooded murder to them. Like thinking that an argument got out of hand is easier to comprehend than somebody premeditatively planning a murder, I guess.
And I could believe that if she had only hit her like 1 or 2 times.
But then you have the psychologist coming in and saying, well, when she shushed her, this brought Candy back and she was already in just fight or flight mode. And
I don't know.
It's so upsetting. But unfortunately, that's all I've got for you today. Her and Pat split up. But other than that, there's no information as to what they're doing now. They've been very much out of the public eye.
What about Allan?
I don't know about Allan. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just wondered.
I'm not
I mean,
sure.
he probably wanted to be out of the public eye as well. He never wanted to be in the public eye. Wow. Well, I don't know. I wasn't in the courtroom. I don't know all the details. I mean, you gave the details, but you know what I mean. Like, no, it's different when you're being presented every single little detail of evidence in a courtroom.
Think a courtroom is a very, like, this sounds ridiculous, but the vibes of a courtroom can really make or break a case. I mean, if things are super tense or if one person is more likable than another person, it's tough, man. And I can see it's a really good story.
Yeah, it was.
I can see it being the truth, but it's also just the overkill is ridiculous to me.
That's what gets me.
Yeah, that's what gets me too.
Yeah. I'm going to leave it there because she wasn't convicted. Right.
It's hard. You can't. I mean, she's elderly now. I don't think she's necessarily going to come after us, but.
Wow. Yep. That's a story. Thanks for sharing. You did a great job.
Thanks. This wasn't a listener that I just found this one and I got really sucked into it. So.
I love the transcendent sex. Maybe Candy went on to find her transcendent sex.
She did get remarried, I'm pretty sure, and either have additional children or marry into additional children.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know how. I don't know how you look past that as a person. You're like dating somebody and they're just like, oh yeah, I was acquitted for murder, but I didn't do it. I don't think there's any. I don't think I could believe a person. But I mean, I'm cynical.
Oh yeah, I'm suspicious.
Yes.
Of everyone.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah.
So for me, like when you said, a courtroom and if somebody's more likable, I'm actually going to be more suspicious of the likable person than I am the non-likable person. Right. As far as like truth telling and stuff, because.
Well, I get what you're saying because you're just like. When I say likable, I don't necessarily mean like charismatic. I just mean like who presents it better.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be as simple as like I had jury duty once, and I've talked about this before. When I had jury duty, the defendant, not only was he just talking ridiculousness, he was very, very, very sweaty and had one long gray ponytail down his back that was braided. And like, I'm not saying anything against that, but just the combinations of all of that. And then he just started spewing conspiracy theory nonsense. I was just like, yeah, it doesn't even matter if I like the people on the other side. I don't like you.
Yeah.
And when you make up your mind about people.
True.
I don't know, but What I do know is that Betty did not deserve what happened to her. It's horrible.
No.
And she had
no.
just started to kind of find some peace and some happiness in her life. It just makes me so sad. This is why I was talking about how I had to find the humor in it, because thinking about Betty just crushed me. Yeah. So if you made it all the way to the end of the episode today, leave us an Eiffel Tower emoji, because Betty she was really excited to go to Europe. So we're going to bring Europe to her memory. If you leave that in our comments, you're going to be eligible for Sunday shout outs. We'll post on our Instagram stories and our Facebook stories.
Yes.
Little shout outs.
Yes. And if you like what you heard today, one of the best ways that you can help indie podcasters such as us is by giving us a rating or review, especially on the big ones, the big platforms like Apple and Spotify.
Shout out to all of our new Spotify listeners recently.
Yes, we've had a lot of you join.
I love it. It's awesome. And you guys on Spotify, there's a little thing at the bottom that says, what did you think of this episode? You can leave your emojis there too.
Yes.
And we'll count that because I check it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want more content or, our outtakes and such, you can always join us over at Patreon.
Yeah, Burden of Proof Pod, I think. Or Burden of Proof, a true crime podcast at Patreon. We also have a YouTube channel if you prefer on YouTube. We don't film ourselves, sorry. But if you prefer if you have YouTube Plus or something and you want to watch stuff on YouTube, you can do that. Follow us on TikTok for little mini vlogs.
Yeah.
I think that's it for today.
That's it.
And we will see you guys next week.
Till next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening, guys. Find us on Instagram and TikTok at Burden of Proof Pod and email us at burdenofproofpod@gmail.com.